My life fades. The vision dims. All that remains are memories. I remember a time of chaos, ruined dreams, this wasted land.
Hello and welcome to episode 6 of From the Wastes. Today's guest is Evan Pickering. Evan is an independent author and writer of the post-apocalyptic series American Rebirth. We chat about his books, PA fiction in general, the works of Cormac McCarthy and Richard Matheson, and the real-world difficulty of surviving the apocalypse. We also discuss using social media for marketing one's work. Might not be what you think. And we also talk about how he deals with negative reviews. And the cusp of the whole thing is we talk about Super Nintendo's Final Fantasy III. Evan Pickering, welcome to The Waste. How you doing?
Evan, my man, it's good to get to chat with you. Thanks for having me on. This is really cool.
It is. Very cool. You are, that sounded dismissive. It's not dismissive. It is actually very cool.
I know, this has been a long time coming for me and you. This is, this is years in the making.
You're an independent author of the post-apocalyptic Rebirth series, American Rebirth series, comprising of the books Hood, Legends, and American Rebirth. Can you tell me about them?
Yeah, sure. So they are what I would describe as a post-apocalyptic Robin Hood adaptation. It's a story that has been really close to me for a long time. I had the idea for years, and I wrote some short stories that were kind of post-apoc related, and actually I wrote some Robin Hood post-apoc short stories. They're stashed away somewhere. But I had
under the bed. Yeah,
they're howling under the bed somewhere, and so I thought it was really cool, and I always loved Robin Hood. Like, I loved the Disney Robin Hood cartoon when I was a kid, and I used to watch Robin Hood movies. And I liked the idea of someone who was like kind of a badass but did it for good reasons. And I think a lot of people like stories like that. And so I always had this idea of like a post-apocalyptic Robin Hood, and I knew I wanted to make a novel out of it. And I had for those people who have read the book and know what happens in the ending and all that stuff, like I had all that. I knew all that was going to happen. That was like my whole goal. I had a whole narrative in mind for like the whole series. And so it was very much kind of a love child for me, this series. And when it finally, like I wrote my first book when I was around 18, but I never published it. And because it just wasn't ready, it was my first one. That's also howling under the bed. And but I always knew I wanted to write this book, and I finally was like, all right. It was I forget what year it was, but I was like, finally, I'm gonna write it. And I got around to writing it, and it took me 4 years or so. So I guess it was around 2012 I started writing it, because I published it in 2016. And it's a story of regular people in the apocalypse. Like, I wanted to be a narrative that, like, the people that you were reading about in the end of the world were people that could be you or someone you knew, or friends or family members. Like, I didn't like apocalyptic stories that felt like the characters were either like gritty survivalists without a care, or like helpless children, or like, I felt like everyone was either like gun you down, no conscience, or it was like the exact opposite. And I wanted to write about like regular people who were capable of both great heroism and great mistakes and tragedies and fear and like insecurity and uncertainty. Like, I wanted to write about regular people in the apocalypse. And the Robin Hood character, I wanted to be an incredibly gifted marksman, like a brilliant, like natural, like he never knew he was a regular kid before the apocalypse, but he finds out he's like a natural shot, but he hates violence, and he he sees himself in the other people and everyone, even strangers, he sees in their nervousness, he sees his nervousness, and in their fight, he sees his fight. He thinks like, I'm fighting for my family, they must be fighting for their family. So why am I right and they're wrong? Because I'm me. And like, I was always obsessed with the idea of like winning and losing, because I think our culture is very, very obsessed with winning. And to me, it seems a silly thing, because like, for you to win, someone has to lose. And that's like, the world is a zero-sum game by and large. And that's never, and it's true in our lives. It's true, and if you get a job, someone else didn't get that job or whatever. But in the apocalypse, it's so much more real, and so much, the stakes are so high, because usually when you win, you live, and when they lose, they die. And so I wanted to write a story about like a Robin Hood guy who wanted to care about people and do the right thing and help people, but in a world where that's not really, it takes extraordinary courage and capability to do that. And at times he can't do that. Like, and that's what the story is about. And the story. So like, Whiskey is sort of the perfect foil for him, because Whiskey's the Little John character, and to him, he's like the guy who's like, you protect your family, you do what it takes, you don't second guess yourself, like you fight and you survive. And so like, they journey together, they have the same goals, like they're fighting for the same cause. But Rob, the main character, is like, but if we do that, we're just as bad as the bad guys. Like, what makes us any different from them if they just do fighting for what they want? If you think everyone you don't know is your enemy, like, then we're all just going to die sooner or later. Like, that's just the reality. And so basically, this is very long-winded, but I wanted to write a story about a grim, dark world, but one that also had hope in it. One that, like, where people still fought for hope, even if it seemed like it was a stupid thing you couldn't do. And so Rob is a character that's like, it's impractical and stupid to hope and to think other people could be good, or that there's something else greater fighting for in a world where you are barely surviving. But he couldn't let go of that. And ultimately, that's what the story is about, is fighting for your family, and fighting like the hero's journey and overcoming great odds to do something amazing. But it's also like a philosophical journey about like, who are we as people? Like, not just in the apocalypse, but in our world. Like, do we care about what happens to the people around us? Even if we don't know them, why do we have to know them first to give a damn about what happens to them? And I always loved, like, I don't know if you read All Quiet on the Western Front, but it was they call it like the best anti-war novel ever. And it's honestly, it's a beautifully written novel, and it has aged very well. Like, if you read it now, it feels very contemporary. And there's a scene where it's a World War I novel, and he's a German soldier. And there's a scene where he's like, they have to run into no man's land, and the main character, like, barely makes it into like a pit in the middle of no man's land, and he finds a French soldier, and he immediately like stabs him and shoots him. But he has to hide in this pit while the gunfire goes off above him, and so he just lays with this soldier that he's basically killed, and like slowly watches the guy die. And when he's seeing the man face to face, he has all these thoughts and feelings of like, he starts crying, and he's like, I want to find your family and tell them I'm sorry. Like, because he sees this young kid like him, is like a young French man dying in a war that he doesn't care about, probably the same way that Paul Baumer, the main character, didn't care about the war he was in. And, he like finds the man's journal. That's actually where I got the idea from in my book. He finds the man's journal, and he starts reading it, and he's like, I'm going to find your family and give this back to you. And it's very much this war dream, this like, this whole, like, one day I'm going to make this right, like anyone who's like, mentally destroyed in war. But I thought it was a beautiful scene, and it drives home the point that it's easy for us to make enemies of those we can't see or those we don't know. But like, once there's so many people that if you knew them, they would be just like you. And why do we have to wait to know them first? It's like sometimes we purposefully make people different or push them away so we don't have to know them. So it's easy to make them enemies, or easy to make them subject of blame. Anyway, these are all big picture things, but this is stuff I really want to tackle in my books, because I thought it was things that I don't know if a lot of people think about, but I'm sure plenty of people think about it, but I wanted to make it relevant and real. So my novels are, it's a hero's journey. It's kind of a classic, like, action adventure sort of danger hero's journey, but there's a very philosophical too, and there's like why are we all doing this kind of question to it. And I also wanted to, in the greater perspective of the trilogy, I wanted to blend the kind of a sci-fi and fantasy, a post-apocalyptic fantasy feel that, like, as the books go on and civilization starts to rebuild, because in the second and third books you start to see civilization rebuild, and it's sort of this new America, and I wanted to show that, like, almost like the history and time seems to repeat itself, like this has happened before, and maybe it'll happen again, like again with the Robin Hood theme, like Robin Hood's happened before, and maybe it'll happen again, and maybe this isn't the last time, like that idea was big for me. Kind of this cyclical nature to human experiences and to life, and maybe the universe. It's funny. This is kind of a behind the curtain moment, but there's a scene in the very beginning of the book, and I don't want to spoil too much what goes on. But the main Hood's talking to the main guy, and the guy says, "Have you ever heard the theory that, if time is infinite and matter is finite, then everything that's happened before has happened. Everything that happened will happen before, again, and has happened before." It's a philosophical theory. Like, if it's true, if time is infinite and matter is finite, then, like, everything you can possibly imagine has happened before. Mm-hmm. Like, a world where we're all squid people has happened before. A world where we all are purple has happened before. Like, you've sat and listened to this podcast before, if you believe in this, like, in a different world, maybe millions, billions of years ago. And it's, like, fascinating to think about. And there's, like, that idea kind of took me too, and the sort of, like, reflexiveness of life, and the sort of this way there seems to be a cycle to things. And, I'm not an expert, I don't know, but I like those ideas. I thought they were fascinating to me, and I wanted to bring them to life in a series. This idea of, like, rebirth and recreation. And to me, the apocalypse is very much about rebirth. It's about, like, one ending is another beginning. I mean, even if humans die, even if all humans died, like, that would be a beginning again somehow for something somewhere, And anyway, this is a very long form answer, but my books are they're ultimately, it's a story of fighting for what matters to you, and for trying to overcome great odds, and fight for what you believe in, even if it seems wrong or ridiculous. So yeah, it's when I tell you I'm proud of them, it doesn't even, the words don't even totally mean what they truly mean to me, because this was definitely, these are stories I wanted to tell for a long time, and I'm so happy to finally have 3 of them, like a trilogy of them out, because it's they're near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to mention was when Hood does, he does become very, very reluctant, someone in his sights, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he doesn't want to pull a trigger. He doesn't want to pull a trigger, and he has to sit there and basically tell himself, "I have to, I have to,"
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a really interesting thing, because you don't really, I haven't seen that all that often, that inner struggle of, I have to do this, I don't want to do it, but I have to do it. And that was really cool to be able to see that.
Yeah, I that to me, that essentially that opening scene is, in a way, what the entire book is about, and obviously it's more complex and it's fleshed out in different ways, but I too, that's actually, it's funny you say that, because that was a big point for me, is like, this is something I never see, but I feel like if the apocalypse actually happened, this would be very real. Like,
oh, absolutely, yeah.
If you look at humanity, like, and I'm a believer that, like, yeah, there's terrible people out there and there's plenty of evil in the world, but, like, by and large, even from a scientific perspective, there's actually a lot of evidence that says, like, social justice is real, and that, like, if you put groups of people together, they don't want to kill each other, and they want to have justice see through. Like, it's actually like a instinctual protective measure for society. And I feel like if the apocalypse actually happened, there would be so many people out there that could kill but didn't want to. And obviously a lot of them would die because that hesitation would kill them, unfortunately,
Right. Yeah.
But there would be some inevitably who would survive, who were, and Rob was one of that characters who, it's 2 years, the book starts 2 years after the apocalypse, and he's still alive, and he's in a situation where he's relatively, he has his normal life, quote unquote. It's not really normal, but he's surviving. But to him, he still has the luxury of being able to, like, question the fact that he still has to kill people, and that it doesn't ever seem okay. Like it's it's so easy, and I think it's almost dangerous in fiction to make it so easy to kill your enemies, because it's just the, and I don't want to get too uh, ethical here and be all high pedestal about it, but the otherism, it's so easy to be like, we're the good guys, are the bad guys, kill the bad guys, and everything's good. Like, that's just not real. Like, that's just a very naive way to look at the world and to look at all struggle. And that's why to Rob, it was like, I'm fighting for my family. There's definitely, whoever that guy's fighting for, he's probably fighting for someone other than himself. Like, maybe every once in a while there's someone who literally has no one else out there and they're just fighting to survive. But most people, humans are social creatures. We gather together. We make families. Even if you don't have your family, you make families of people you care about, of friends, and it was, to me, that was the biggest thing about the book that I wanted to be real and to be, honestly, like you said, it's not common, and I want to be the kind of crux of the book, is that, like, regular everyday people, we're not killers. Like, most people, I mean, unless maybe you're a cop or you've gone into military service and you've had to, but even those people, like, they're not, just because they've had to do that, they're not killers. Like, their duty has maybe made them do this, but, like, very few people, I think, are naturally killers, are naturally people who feel no compunction killing another human. And so to me, it seemed irresponsible and kind of not realistic to show all this post-apoc fiction where, like, and look, I love the early seasons of The Walking Dead, and it's cool and all. But, like, this idea that all these people are just like, yep, okay, and then they pick up a gun and they're like, first off, they're all sharpshooters, which is hilarious. Like, they all can't miss, which is, like, funny. I mean, I'm one to talk. Rob is obviously a sharpshooter, but I wanted to be that he was, like, a natural marksman. On those shows, it's like everyone's great with a gun and everyone is just like, okay, and they just shoot bad guys. And, like obviously zombies are easy to shoot, but they're like, those guys are trying to get us, and they just shoot them. And I'm like, what? I don't know. That always bothered me. Like, my favorite character in the series was Shane, and because he was such a shades of gray character. Like, he did good things, but he also did bad things, and that seemed more real to me. Of, like, that's a real person who, like, doesn't know what to do. Anyway, so I just and I have some self-doubt about it. Honestly, I have some self-doubt about sometimes where I'm like, am I writing a too Pollyannish series where it's like, oh, everyone wants to fight for what's good? But I think that's, honestly, I think that's real. I think people want to be pessimistic and say that, like, oh, the world's a vampire and it'll kill you and everyone wants to kill each other and eat each other or whatever. Like, reality is, like, the fact that we live today and that the world hasn't blown itself up yet is proof that we live in a world where most people don't want to kill each other. Like, because if we did, we would have been dead already.
Right.
Like, if people loved killing each other more than they loved not killing each other, we have the bombs, we have the nukes, we have the everything. We could do it. It's anyway. So I was glad you brought that up. That's definitely kind of the big feature of the book, and it's just something I think about all the time. Like, that's the kind of stuff that gets in my brain. It doesn't really leave.
So, why did you pick the post-apocalyptic genre to write in? I mean, do you play PA games, or do you like PA movies, television shows? I mean, is that really kind of what you're into, and so that's what you wanted to write about, or?
Yeah, it wasn't originally, like, I think I first got into it towards the end of college, which is probably like 7 or 8 years ago now. But I grew up big on fantasy and sci-fi. Like, I watched Star Trek. Me and my dad and my brother used to watch Star Trek as kids, and I loved reading fantasy novels. Like, that was my bread and butter. Like, the first novels I think I read were like Boxcar Kids novels, and then I started reading Dragonlance was the first. The Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Dragons. I think it's TSR. I don't remember, but those fantasy novels, and I was in love. I was like 10, 11 years old, and I was in love with fantasy. And I played fantasy video games. I played like the early Final Fantasies, and you talked about J.J. Shirty, like Secret of Mana. I loved Secret of Mana. That was one of the best games. Me and my brother used to play like a maniac, and but I always loved these, like like Final Fantasy 3, or it's Final Fantasy 6 or whatever in America. There's actually an apocalypse in that game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, halfway through the game, the bad guy wins, and this is, by the way, this isn't a spoiler. This game's been out for 30 years. If any of you are the bad guy wins and like literally like sunders the world, and everything's like totally messed up. And you're literally, the second half of the game is in quote unquote the world of ruin, which is basically an apocalyptic world. And like the main characters have to slowly find each other and then like rally together and then eventually beat the bad guy. Like, but it was so cool to me. One, the bad guy winning to me was like such a weird, unexpected twist. It was like, holy crap! Like he like they tried to stop him and they failed, and it was really cool. And then like I was so struck at a young age. I think I was probably like 11 or 12 when I played this game with my brother. So struck by this post-apocalyptic world, and I was so moved by the characters because they like the world gets sundered and they all get split apart, and like one by one you find your old people you adventured with, and you like find out what happened to them. And some of them had like huge personality crises where they like were no longer themselves. They self-doubt, like they were. It was so crazy. It was such. I mean, honestly, it's such a. I'm talking up. It's a brilliant game, and it the graphics are ancient now, but it was like the story was incredible. And that was the first real post-apocalyptic game, when I really think about it, that I ever played, even though it's a fantasy game. But I think it's really interesting. I think post-apocalyptic is like inherent in fantasy. Like a lot of fantasies about like, oh, the first age, the second age, the third age, and those ages happened because the world like blew up basically, or a huge war blew up the world or something, and it's in history, it's in like religious, like the like a flood, a sundering, like a cataclysm, like all these things they're in history. Like the Dark Ages in history is very much sort of an apocalyptic event. Like the Renaissance was like a rebirth thereafter, and I think like the apocalypse is very much like in our psyche and in the way we write stories in general, even if they're not inherently post-apoc stories. And so to me, it's such a interesting. It's such a pivot. To me, it's like almost inherent in the way humans are and in storytelling. What I loved about post-apoc is that it's so close. Like the genre. What I mean to say post-apoc, I mean the genre is that usually post-apocalyptic fiction is like right after it happened, or usually like soon after it happened, and you get these people pushed up against the wall that is the undoing of civilization. And I love the genre because you find out who people really are. And even in that old video game Final Fantasy VI, like you saw these people who had these identities, like I am this person, and then when their civilization collapsed, when their empires collapsed, when their families collapsed, all of a sudden that was torn down and they were someone different. Like they had to figure out who they were. So I read, I read The Road in college, and I was absolutely immersed. I thought it was unbelievable. Cormac McCarthy's brilliant, and his world is so stark. His lack of the verb, he never uses the verb to be in that book, which is crazy. A lot of people who read it know that. And then I read I Am Legend. That was like, it's probably still to this day my favorite book, or one of my favorite books. Is unbelievable. And I loved it because it was very much like he was a regular guy. Like he lost his family, and he's like, and that book is Richard Madsen. He actually wrote a lot of Twilight Zone episodes, and when you know that, it sort of makes sense when you read the book because it's very Twilight Zone-y. But it was so, I love the book because one day he'd wake up and he's super inspired and he's motivated and he's working hard. And the next day he wakes up and he's drunk and hates his life, and why is he doing this? He's alone and misses, he just wants to die and be with his family. And like, you felt like you were on the ride with them. Like it felt so real. Like this felt like a real person in the apocalypse. It's like, it wasn't just like, yeah, we're good, let's soldier on, keep soldiering on, it was like, he had doubt, he had fear, he would get huge bursts of energy, he would have huge waves of doubt, and it was like, I loved that. I thought it was so real, and that very much is a motivator for me in writing my books. I wanted to feel real and have these characters that were not on a straight line, and so the genre to me is just, I love how it tears away all the trappings of civilization and all these things that we tell ourselves we are. Like every one of us has a narrative of who you say you are in your head. And maybe that is you, and maybe it's not. Like, maybe a lot of it's true, and maybe some of it's not. But like, we change with time, and our narrative of ourselves doesn't always update as we change. But when you have the apocalypse, like, there's no luxury of having this narrative of who you think you are. It's just, who you are in the situation. It's like, do you save the person or do you run? You know, do you fight or do you flee? Do you give up or do you keep going? Do you find meaning in the emptiness, or do you like surrender to the end? You know, like it's there's so much existential, so many existential things that goes on in the psyche of someone facing such great turmoil and the destruction of civilization, because civilization is what we base our entire selves on. Like your job is a part of civilization, your house is a part of civilization, the state you live in, the country you live in, most of our identity is tied to civilization. And if you tear that away, like, who are you? Like, you find out real quick who you are. And at least I think you would. And some people would crumble and some people wouldn't. And that's interesting too. So
it is. You can prepare, you can train, you can fantasize, you can do all of these things, but until it happens, there is nothing that is gonna. You can't definitively say this is what I'm gonna do, even though you say this is what I'm gonna do. Yeah, until that moment happens, no idea, none.
And that's so. I feel like that is not. That idea that you just said is not appreciated enough, especially in a lot of this fiction and a lot of this stuff. It's like you really don't, man. Like, and I don't like, and I've always said, and obviously me and my friends joke around like, oh man, what would we do if it was zombie apocalypse? Like, how would we survive? Like, if we'll be like hanging out, we'll be like, if right now it happened, what would we do? You know, it's like, it's fun, but sure. I've always gone on record being like, I do not want the apocalypse because I don't know if I would survive, and I consider myself like a very capable person, but if I had to, like you said, if I had the gun in front of me and I had to point at someone, like, I don't know if I could do it. I really don't. Like, but even then, I don't know. Like, I still, like, maybe I could, maybe I couldn't. Like you said, I don't know until you're in the, and no one knows until you're in the situation. And like, war shows that to people, like soldiers, and that's why war fiction is so, and war stories and war nonfiction is so moving, because like, you just see people coming apart at the seams or not, or whatever, heroism and insane, like just insanity. And, I think in fiction, often we show, like I was talking about Walking Dead before, people are like, I'm an 11-year-old kid. I pick up a gun and now I'm a sharpshooter. It's like, the hell are you talking about? Like, or the guy's like, even if you were like a cop or something, like being a cop is different from being a survivor in the apocalypse. You know what I mean? Like, it certainly helps being a cop or being a soldier because you know more than your average person and you're far more equipped to deal with it. But that still doesn't mean that, like my grandpa was a cop and they eventually like took him off duty and had him train people because he like never really like giving people tickets and wasn't really like, he wasn't basically like wasn't mean enough, or what, not mean enough, but he wasn't like enforcing the law enough. They're like, oh, just train the young guys. Like my grandpa was a cop and I don't think he would be able to just like gun people down if he had to, so it's that idea that you said, I think is really interesting, and it's underappreciated in fiction a lot.
Let's talk about your book covers for a minute. Your books had their original covers, and now they have new covers. Well, they've had new covers for a little while now, and they're gorgeous. They're stunning. They're gorgeous. Can you tell me about that whole process of? And I see that a lot. I see a lot of books that the covers will change at some point. Yeah. And I've always wondered, did the author just want to make it better? Did they want to make it different? Did they, why did they change the cover? And so, would you mind talking about that?
Yeah. I actually think this kind of topic's really interesting, and I'm big into the whole production side of, like, I mean, I love writing, but a lot of writers don't love the publication and production side. I actually think it's fascinating. And yeah, writers definitely love to tinker with covers, like it's just, being like, oh, how can I make it better? Because it's your package, it's your selling point. It's honestly the biggest tool to sell your book. And if you don't realize that, and the title are the two biggest tools to sell your book. And you need to understand what your title does and what your cover does. And if you don't, you probably need to change it, which is crazy, but it's true. And I've studied a lot about this stuff. But the reality is, like, even for me, and I studied a lot, and even for a lot of writers, like, it's not an exact science. Like, Um, I loved my original covers, but they were very limited, and I made them with the help of actually my first cover. And you remember, you were there, so you've been there since the beginning. You remember the first cover for Hood, um, and I had help making it. There was a moderator for the Apocalypse Whenever group on Goodreads. Her name's Gertie. She's awesome. She's super helpful. I literally was trying to make a cover, and I was terrible image editing skills, and I asked her for help, and she, free of just really kindly, just helped me out and helped me. I had problem merging some images and doing a few things, and she just did it for me seamlessly and helped and just gave it back to me, and it was super awesome of her. Um, and I'm really proud of the first covers. Honestly, I loved them, but they were limited and they weren't professionally done. They were done by me, and like they're pretty good for what they were. And I don't get me wrong, I love having the creative control, but I'm not, I'm not a graphic designer. I'm not a visual artist. Like my drawings are terrible. Like, and I got some friends who are like comic writers and stuff, and they're better at this than me. But so anyway, it was a hard decision, honestly, because I did love my cover, and a lot of people tell me they like the cover too. But I wanted, since these were this series is definitely my baby, I wanted to put the money back in, because I figured just taking a little bit of money, investing it back in the books were well worth it. So I went on K-Boards, which is a forum for writers, both self-pub and conventionally pubbed, and a lot of book cover people just promote their stuff on there, which is cool. And I was looking around, I saw some image editors and stuff, and a lot of people who make beautiful covers by merging images and just graphic design. But I wanted like a illustrated cover. I wanted like a digitally illustrated or physically illustrated, whatever. I wanted like a drawn cover, like the old fantasy books I used to read. And so I found this guy advertising, Jeff Brown, and it was expensive. His stuff is pricey, but honestly, I looked at his art and it is gorgeous. It was like beautiful, unbelievable stuff. And I could tell it was all illustrated. Like this wasn't just images being graphically designed. This was art. I mean, not that isn't art, but you know what I mean. Like this was drawn. And so I had these ideas, and he worked with me, and he was super helpful. We worked through a few ideas first, and he came up with the cover for Hood, and it was very much this. It was perfect, like exactly what I wanted, like Hood and whiskey kind of staying there, and like this broken city in the background, and like this big landscape, and but it still showed the world was green and growing, and like not totally dead, like the natural world was still alive, even if our civilization was dead, and I wanted to show that. Because to me, the feel of that is big in the book. And yeah, and then he did the cover for Legends, which was even better. It's this like, a wrecked, beautiful sunny day in like destroyed New York City. And the third cover, which was kind of like this like shrouded sniper, which I can't talk about for the sake of the story, but in the woods next to this like big like tower, and it was, I don't know, it was really cool, but they were gorgeous. And but the big thing for me is like when I was studying covers, which I think is really interesting, and it's kind of not well known even by a lot of authors, is that your cover, like a lot of times people are like, I want a scene from the book, or I want a certain thing that conveys the character, whatever. The reality is your cover actually very often should have nothing to do with the scene in the book at all. Your cover's point is to actually catch the reader and convey the theme and feel of your book, which is like a lot of people don't know, but like very often you could use a scene not from the book at all, and that actually might be better, which is interesting. But it has to like encapsulate what the book is thematically about and the feeling your book is trying to convey. And so my covers aren't exactly scenes from the book. They're sort of related to some scenes in the book. But it didn't matter to me because it was more important that they really convey what the story was about. And that to me was a big goal of mine. And I really felt that Jeff Brown did a great job doing that. His art was unbelievable. And it's cool. Like I look at him and I know you've said you really like the art and stuff, and it's awesome getting feedback from people. But I'll tell you, it's funny. I still have people who miss the old covers. They're like, "Oh, I love the old style. It was all gritty and dark." And but I knew the new covers were true to what my vision was, and I knew they'd convey what the story, what the feel. And I don't know if you agree, but I feel like they convey the feel of what the story is, which was big for me. So, yeah, I mean, I love this kind of stuff. I think covers are really interesting, and there's a lot more that goes into them than people think. People usually like, I just want a pretty cover that's a scene from my book. It's like, well, it's not always that. Like, your cover is your biggest piece of advertising. You got to make sure it really drives home what your book is.
As an independent author, tell me about the marketing is a huge deal.
Yes.
What did you do to market your books?
Well, I think this is actually going to kind of, before I go fully into my kind of my path in marketing, the one thing I think I kind of connect, because it connects to both the book cover and the marketing part. And people, and you touched on it, people don't realize like the most important marketing you can do for your book, and a lot of authors don't know this, is the cover and the title. And by that I mean they need to tell the reader what the genre is and what the story is about.
Yes.
And like you said, like you'll go into a bookstore, you'll go into Amazon, and if the cover excites you, if you're like, whoa, that's really cool, and the title then interests you and tells you what the genre is, you'll probably buy or consider buying that book. But like, so a lot of times people will go into like they want the title, they want the cover to look like this, and they'll title like it'll be a like a mystery series or something, or it'll be like a thriller, and the title will be like The Gilded Rose or something, because like somehow the Gilded Rose is, maybe it's like a bar in the story, or it's like a important item in the story. But that's a terrible title, because it sounds like a romance title. And if the title does not immediately convey to you what the genre is, the title has failed. And so, but if the title, it's a thrill, and the title is like The Sudden Departure, now you're gripping people. Now you're like, what happened? Who left? What, did someone die? Like, what's the departure? Is it a plane? Like, is a person? Like you're getting someone like, this is showing some action, some catastrophe, some problem. And so like this is really interesting, and I think a lot of people, it's lost on them. And it's like my book is literally Hood, a post-apocalyptic novel,
right?
And which tells you immediately it's probably something to do with Robin Hood, and it's post-apocalyptic. And like, to me that was super important to get, like, I wanted it to be very obvious to the reader what in general sort of they were getting into. Because honestly, like, let's say you buy a book and the cover is beautiful and the title makes sense. If like you read the book and at the end you look at that cover and you're like, oh, that's funny, that scene wasn't in the book, you're not like mad. You're not like, oh my God, I was lied to. Like that cover did its job. It got you to buy and read the book. So writers should be very cutthroat about their covers and their titles. And often they're not. Often they're very, very willowy and sing-songy and feely about, oh, I wanted this, I want this kind of thing. And you have to be very, if you want to be good marketing in your book, cutthroat with your titles, cutthroat with your covers, be very, very smart about what you're trying to convey. And I was lucky enough that I did that kind of instinctually before I started studying, like the Hood post-apocalyptic novel. I literally just went on Amazon and started looking through books, and I saw one that said a post-apocalyptic novel as a subtitle, and I said, I'm doing that because Hood is cool, but I want them to know it's apocalyptic. Like, if this is Hood, like, is it a kid wearing a hoodie? Is it our time? Is it Robin Hood from Middle Ages? Like, I wanted to be clear. And so that actually, in terms of marketing, some of the best stuff I did was, for my crude cover that I had in the beginning, it conveyed the genre. It was very bleak and grim and apocalyptic. And there was like a gun there, so you knew there was probably some kind of gun combat. Mm-hmm. And the titles told you the genre and the theme. And so honestly, that's probably some of the best marketing I did, which I did sort of instinctually, and I was very lucky that it worked out that way. Because a lot of people ask me, like, how did you do so well with your first book? Like, how did it blow up like that? I mean, it wasn't like J.K., I'm not like, not a superstar author or nothing, but in terms of indie authors, like, I did really well for my first year. Honestly, because people ask me, like, what tricks did you do? And look, I went and I did, I went on Book Barbarian, which sells it's promotions for sci-fi and fantasy books. I did all the promotion sites, Ear to News Today, all those ones. There's a ton of them, but I promoted the book on there. but I did some grassroots stuff too. Like I went and just kind of chatted with people, and it was like, I didn't. When I first did it, I did the wrong way, which is, by the way, the wrong way is, hey, this is me, buy my book, which is by the single worst thing you can do right now. If you're an author and you're listening, that is the single worst thing you can do. What you should do is just go meet and talk to people and just be friendly and chat with people. And then if one day, if they're like, hey man, I see you write books, I'm interested, then just be like, cool, let me give you a free copy. And like, hopefully they read it and like it. And honestly, that sounds very slow and grassroots, but that's the best marketing you can do, because you need people to get invested in your story. And if they don't know your story and they're not going to try, then get them invested in you, you know, which again, it can sound very cutthroat, but you meet some really cool people, honestly. Like, it's been really fun. Like, I've met I've met you through this. I've met a lot of other cool authors and artists, and a lot of authors and artists tend to support each other and stuff like this, which is really cool. And so I went on Goodreads. I talked to people on there, on post-apoc forums. I went on Kboards, and I just kind of was transparent about my process and what it was going like, and a lot of other authors supported me there. You know, I sort of just like was open about what I was doing and what I wanted to do, and I just was very talkative to people. And the book just kind of took off. Like, later on, I learned better marketing strategies, like how to do pay-per-click ads. Like I do Amazon pay-per-click ads, which are super useful. Like when you go to Amazon, you see like sponsored items related to this item or something. That's a pay-per-click ad. Like, all that stuff is super useful to get eyeballs on your books. I got a BookBub, which is really hard to get for Hood, and that was like a huge deal for me. BookBub is like the book promotion site, and is really, really hard to get. And I was so psyched when I got it. But yeah, you know, like the marketing, the promotion, there's this brilliant website, Nicholas Erik, Nikolas Erik, where he talks about the ways to do promoting and marketing. And I studied pretty much everything he said. And if you're an author and you're not an idiot, you should probably study it, because he basically took years of failing and not failing and everything he did wrong and right, and condensed it into like a very easy to read guide for free on the internet. And like, if you don't read it, you're out of your mind. And I'm open. I tell people, I'm like, hey, look, read this. You know, like it'll help you. You know, so I don't even know him. Like, I've chatted with him on the forum a little bit. Like, this isn't some promotion on my side. Like, I barely have talked to the guy, but I am grateful that he shared his knowledge for free. And I think if you're a writer, you should read it and learn, because marketing is ultimately about three things. It's about getting eyes. It's about flow of traffic. It's generating traffic to your books. It's about like catching your readers once you have them, hooking them, and keeping them. And then it's generating a mailing list and hopefully getting them to be invested in you as an author or your books. And ultimately, your books have to be good. You know, if they suck, people won't care and they won't come back. So like, you have to produce a good product. But even if you produce a good product, it is hard, and getting people to care. The number one mistake writers make when they first start is they think people will care. And like, that sounds brutal, but you have to ask yourself, who gives a shit? Because like, if your story isn't immediately hooking them, they're not gonna take the time. You know, like, I mean, some people will, but a lot of people won't. And so like, when you first start writing the first pages of your book, it better hook your reader. You know,
exactly.
Like with Hood, I showed the conflict. Like, he doesn't want to kill someone. He knows he has to, but he doesn't want to kill someone. And I showed you immediately, because that's what the book is about. And so if that interests you, you'll immediately be hooked to the book. And like, you just need to be really smart about this. And, you know, because the funny thing about writing is, like, especially first-time novelists, it's your baby. So of course it means the world to you. And you think, of course, so then it might mean like 20% of the world to someone else. The reality is, it probably means like 0.1% of the world to someone else, you know, like, and so you have to know that, like, you can still be proud of it and be happy with it, but you have to be really smart about trying to get it in people's hands and trying to get people to care and get people interested. So like, you know, I think like I said, I was lucky. A lot of things went right for me. But I've studied a lot of this craft ever since, and I think that I think the biggest problem with a lot of writers isn't their writing at all. Like a lot of writers there's a lot of good ones. I mean, look, there's bad writers out there too, of course, but there's a lot of good ones out there that don't realize how much they're shooting themselves in the foot by not using this knowledge that's out there to really make sure you're bringing people in, like really make sure they are hooked. And like if you get their eyes on your page, you better make sure you have the best product out there to grab their attention.
Right.
And yeah, it's just interesting.
Yeah, well, I love to read, and since I started doing this, I've got a shit ton of books, man. and anymore, and part of me feels bad about it, but part of me, if you don't catch me on the first page, first couple pages, man, it's on to the next one. I mean, I've got more books than I'll ever read. I'll be dead before I read everything.
Dude,
and so, and you also made a really super good point about this whole social media thing, especially on Twitter, with using Twitter or whatever social media site. I spend more time on Twitter than anything else. Using that as marketing your book. And I don't know if it's just me. I don't know what the percentage of it is. It's obvious that it's obvious what I read. That I'm a PA guy. So I'll get followed by somebody, and I'll get a DM, and hey, check out my book, and it's like an automatic no.
No, of course, exactly. Because why do you give a shit? It's like I said before. Why do I give a shit? You can't assume people want to care.
Right. And so, but then I'll get followed by a writer, and because the first thing I do is I go to their bio, and then I go and look through their timeline, and if every single tweet is just buy my book, then I tend not to not to pay attention to it. But if I see that they're engaging with followers, I just followed this lady maybe I don't know, about a month ago, and I have no idea what she writes. I have no idea what her books are, because all she does is engage with her readers.
Which is great. That's great.
And so
probably do a little more promotion, but still, that's great.
And so the first thing I should do, or should have done, is go and see what she wrote. God, I feel like I should feel bad about this. She doesn't write post-apocalyptic fiction, so
it's not just your thing,
right? And I'm totally a literary tribalist, man. I mean, if it's not dystopian or PA, or I used to read a lot of science fiction, military sci-fi, space opera. I don't read that much anymore. I've got a couple authors whose stuff I read that I will read whatever they write.
Yes.
And same with PA authors. If you wrote, I'm going to say it straight out. If you ended up writing, I don't read westerns, but if you wrote a western, I would read it.
That's awesome.
Because you're an awesome writer, and
Thanks.
I would hope you'd make it PA, but whatever. Yeah, the whole using social media as marketing. I mean, I see it every single day, and I don't know. I'm sure there's websites out there. In fact, I remember there was one that was talking about and it was tailored towards new writers. This is okay. You got to get on Twitter, and this is how you use Twitter to sell your book.
Yeah.
And maybe it works. I don't know. I have no idea. Because you go and you'll see. They'll have 70,000 followers. Well, I mean, come on. How many of those did you pay for?
Yeah,
B,
exactly.
How many are bots? But
And
if
how many of them care?
Right, but if they're using some sort of website, some sort of automated, there's websites where they'll automate tweets for you.
Yep.
So maybe they're getting enough out there where one out of every 10,000 hits, they'll get a click on their Amazon page, or I don't know. Because when I first started this, I joined Twitter to follow a writer.
Oh yeah.
And so that's kind of been what I've done since the beginning.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely right ways to do it and wrong ways to do it. And I guess if you're able to sell books, awesome. But
Yeah.
I really do believe that engaging with the readers is probably way more effective than just blasting 47 tweets every 30 minutes out into the ether,
Uh,
telling people to buy your book. But hey, okay, so do you read your book reviews? And if you do, if I can't imagine you getting bad ones, but if you get bad ones, how do you deal with that?
yeah, this is actually something that's pretty interesting. I think basically most readers, I believe most authors read all their book reviews, and if they say they don't, they're probably lying. Um, I do, like, I've gotten a lot of positive reviews, but I definitely have gotten some negative ones too. And it's funny. It doesn't, in the very beginning, and I got a lot of positive reviews to start, which is awesome. But when the very beginning, when I started getting negative reviews, it definitely, I was like, oh man, that sucks. Like I really, because you want people, everyone, of course, you want people to like your book. Again, a writer's lying if they say they don't care. Of course they care. Um, yeah, it was kind of a bummer at first, but like very quickly, I kind of realized that it was actually, I don't get upset at all anymore about bad reviews. Like, I'm mildly like, oh man, that's a bummer they didn't like it, but there's two things I realized about bad reviews, and then one of them is that for a lot of these reviews, there's actually valuable information there that you can learn from. Even if the review itself is junk, what they can trying to convey is something you can use to learn from. So like if they're annoyed that something happened in the book, or they're frustrated about something, whatever, like unless it's totally ridiculous, like is kind of worth digging in and thinking like, okay, what's the reader motivation there? Like what would they want? What did they want that they were denied by the book? And if you want to be a better writer, it's actually really good to figure out what your readers want. And like you can't, and the biggest thing is the main reason why I don't get bothered by bad reviews is because you cannot make everyone happy. Like there's just, even if you write the most readable, fun, enjoyable book out there, there are people who will hate it. And like, the interesting thing is you actually need that. Like, and a lot of people who start writing don't realize this, like you need bad reviews. Like if you don't have bad reviews, like people think it's all nonsense. If people think all your reviews, it actually discredits your good reviews to have no bad reviews. Because everyone gets bad reviews. And frankly, if you write a book where you didn't take risks enough that someone hates it, it's probably not a book that someone loves, because you have to take risks as a writer. And some people won't like those risks, but some people will love them. And hopefully more people love them than don't. And, I took a lot of risks in book one, as you know what happens in the whole story. And a lot of people are mad about some of the things I did, but it was a risk I wanted to take for a greater narrative in the series. And I'm proud of that. And but I honestly learned a ton. I learned a ton from the risks I took and from the bad reviews I got. Because I mean, it was mostly great reviews. A lot of people really loved it, were moved by the story, and that meant the world to me. A lot of people who were very angry and very upset, or underwhelmed. They're just like, man, this is whatever, And honestly, I'd rather people be mad than meh. Like the worst reviews are the one where people are like, whatever, it didn't mean anything. Like if they get mad, then you kind of did your job, because like it sounds weird, but you want to get an emotional reaction from them. And even if it's one that they're like upset about, one of the best reviews I got was like, and I got a ton of great ones, but one of the best reviews basically said like, I almost didn't leave this review because I was so messed up when the book ended, and it was so devastating. He's like, but I wanted to come back and write this review because it was a great book, and it really, the more I thought about it, it really meant something. And like I was like, because I knew that they first weren't okay with it, but they came back. In fact, they came back and had were kind enough to like say something, come back and take the effort to say something, to give me feedback. That's what really was awesome, because ultimately, like, and if you're out there and you're a reader, I know it's a pain in the ass writing a review for every book and every author wants reviews, but like writing reviews is the best thing you can do for an author. Like it's just the best thing. If you loved a book, write them a review. It doesn't matter if it's 5 words. Like it, first off, if they read it, they'll be super happy if it's positive. And even if they're not, like they should be happy the review is there. But even bad reviews, like there's no such thing as bad press. Like bad reviews are still credibility. There still shows that someone read your book and took the time to say something. So I tell people, I'm like, whatever you feel, I don't care. Just write a review. Like if it's bad, that's fine. Right? It's fine. Yeah, reviews. Like for me, the feedback I get in reviews. And dude, I'll be honest with you. If I'm having a day where I feel bummed out, or I'm like not proud, whatever, having some self-consciousness about my books, I'll go back and I'll rerun my reviews, because it makes me. And I don't know if all authors feel this way, but it makes me happy. Like even like seeing like the good reviews and knowing that someone cared enough or was moved enough that really meant something to them. And even the bad reviews, people are like, it wasn't for me. I'm like, okay, it's okay. It wasn't for them. Like it's not for everyone. So like reviews, I think are a super interesting thing, and writers get very sensitive about reviews, and because they pour their heart and soul into the book, and to have someone shred it apart at times can be devastating. But I actually, again, if you're a writer out there, the number one thing, don't ever comment on a review. I commented on 1 or 2 reviews, and I never was aggressive. I never was angry. I just calmly was trying to talk to the person once or twice. And sometimes I commented on positive reviews, and sometimes I commented on negative reviews. Just don't do it at all. It doesn't look good. There's no good thing you can do if you want to talk to your reader, give them your email address they can reach you at or something, and tell them to talk to you there in private, because an author responding on those reviews just looks terrible. It just does. Unfortunately, it's the truth. It makes you look obsessed. I mean, I don't care. I don't care that I commented on a few reviews. It's just part of growing up. It's part of being a writer and learning. But yeah, it's reviews are a huge part of a writer's life. It really doesn't matter. Again, if a writer doesn't tell you that, they're lying, because ultimately you want to know your book was read by people and that it meant something to them. So my reviews are near and dear to my heart, and I've read your review many times, and I loved it. I still love it. It's great knowing that you enjoyed the book so much, man. And it's like, and that's why I tell people, like, if you really want to do something for an author, leave a review, because especially if it's a positive review, like you'll make their day, you'll make their month. Because for me, it's like it's honestly the best thing I can say about it is it's feedback, and like even the negative reviews, I don't get upset anymore, and I don't. It doesn't bother me because it's feedback, and it's a lot of it's valuable. A lot of it has taught me when I write a new series, when I write a new book, like certain expectations readers have, and if you don't meet those expectations, you will lose some readers. Like you absolutely will, and if you want to take that risk, that's fine, but know what you're doing and know what your process is and what your plan is, because it's reader expectation is a big thing, and it's hard you can't please everyone, and you can't lose at the same time. You can't lose what you want to write in your heart, so you can't get too into pleasing the reader, but you should find a way to make your story something wildly enjoyable for the reader. Like you should, if you're a writer, you should be doing that and focusing on that and that alone, basically. I think reviews are a really interesting topic, and I love all mine, even the bad ones. And for all my readers out there, because I got a ton of reviews on the first book, if you read the second and third book, leave me a review. Just like that is the best thing you can do for me if you're out there and you listen to this and you've read my books, because I had a ton of people with reviews on the first book, and then I realize this is natural, that people tend to review the later books less, because they're just like, they review the first book, they get into it, and then they just cruise through and then move on to the next thing, so yeah, reviews are the lifeblood of any author, and the bad ones are a part of it, and if you're smart, you'll learn from them. So that's kind of like my whole ethos on it, Yeah, the one I want to add one caveat. The last thing we're talking about, real quick. The funny thing about what you're talking about with the marketing with Twitter The truth is, none of that stuff works. Like the spamming your book out there, even the big, because I know like big writers who are like I've gone to a lot of writing conferences. I've met writers who are like big time writers who've done really well. They're conventionally published and all this stuff, and like they sell books. Like yeah, obviously like their publishing houses will put their stuff on Twitter. Those books sell because people know the authors and they love them, like because because of the author brand, really. Like these big publishing houses, like they don't know how to publish, like they don't know how to market books where people don't know the authors. They don't know what they're doing, and it's very clear these days, and especially, and you like you said, you'll see these things like, oh, we can market your book and get this many followers and so many stuff. Like most of it is complete nonsense. The vast majority of it's nonsense, and poor authors get trapped in it. And I just want to say it as a cautionary tale to writers, like don't think you go out there and just spam your book or get someone else to spam your book or get a marketing house to spam your book. Like they don't know what they're doing. It doesn't work. It might have worked when Twitter first came out, but nowadays, if you go search like free book on Kindle, like do a hashtag like that, and you will see literally millions of people trying to sell their books just by spamming it out there. Like, do you think there are people, real readers, combing through those lists? Like, there aren't.
I never have.
Yeah, believe me, almost no one is, and then the chances they'll pick your book among all the millions out there being just spammed, it's like you got to be organic about this. Yeah. Anyway, that's just the last thing I want to say, and it's just because I'm very, I have a lot of feelings about it. I think it's really interesting, so I just kind of wanted to toss that in there.
Do you still think word of mouth is the best thing to do? Like when I first started doing this, I always thought, I really like this thing. I think you'll like it too. And I always thought if I could get if one person saw that and go, oh, okay, well maybe I'll look at it. And they liked it too, totally, mission accomplished.
Yep.
I got somebody to like something that I liked.
Yes.
Now, if you got a bunch of people to do that, it's just that whole word of mouth thing. Does that work in today's?
Absolutely. Word of mouth is literally the best, and I would be hard pressed to have someone tell me otherwise. Word of mouth is, because ultimately, if word of mouth goes far enough, that's just a famous author.
Right.
And so that's what word of mouth is. And I listened to a podcast, the Joanna Penn podcast. She's actually she's a great self-published author who's big on self-publishing. I met her in person at a conference, and she was the person who turned me on to self-publishing. And she's awesome. She's a really wonderful, kind person who's very generous with her knowledge as well. And I saw a podcast with her where she was talking to this author who published a thriller novel. I forget the author's name. She published a thriller novel about a female murderer, female serial killer, which was like super rare. And it was, apparently it was a good book. She published it, and for years it sold basically nothing. And one day it just started selling like crazy, and she had no idea what was going on. And eventually she realized it's because, just for fun, because she was bored, she started talking with a bunch of people in a forum and became really good friends with this huge community of readers in a forum, and was never trying to sell her book to any of them. She just made friends with all of them. And then eventually people like saw her book and her signature and started like, and were connected, they were invested with her as a person because they like literally just became friends online. And then once it was just that group it was a big group apparently that started reading it, but they all loved it and they all shared it with everyone they knew. And all of a sudden her book blew up and she was selling ridiculous numbers of copies. There you go. And like, that's how this stuff works. Like that's real market. Ultimately that's why I say cover and blurb and title is so important, because like getting someone to care. And like, I have friends and people who tell me, like one of my best friends, he tells me, he's like, at my job, I tell people about your books because I think it's so cool you wrote them. And every once in a while, like he tells me about someone who was interested, he literally gives my book to them, and then they love it and they give it to their son or their cousin, and this stuff. And like, I don't care if you give a free copy of my book to someone. It doesn't bother me. Like, that's great. That's amazing. So word of mouth, you're absolutely right. Word of mouth is the defining characteristic of a successful book, because it means that it made an impression enough that someone wants to share it with someone else. And that's how eventually, if that goes far enough, that's how a famous author is made. And all this other stuff, like, it's literally all this other marketing is just a tool to try to get word of mouth,
Right.
And that's why the quality of the book has to be as high as possible. It's why you really have to work on your craft and be as good as possible, because there's a lot of great books out there, man. Like, you're competing with a lot. You're competing with big name authors. You're competing with everything, and you really have to pour your heart and soul into it in more ways than one. Like, you pour heart and soul and brain. Like, you have to be really smart about the story you're telling and whether or not it's interesting or that anyone would care. Anyway, so I'm going on a tangent, but like, yeah, I totally agree with you. And like essentially, like, what this, like, the grassroots social media marketing I'm talking about, where you just talk to people, that's word of mouth.
Right.
It's on the internet, but it's essentially the same thing. It's like, that's how this stuff really works. Because readers, I'm like you, man. I got a pile of books that'll never end, and I'll die before I finish them all. And everyone's got to pick and choose what they read. And I'm like you, dude. If I'm not hooked in short order, I'm not reading it. And I know some people stick to books and they'll see it through no matter what. That's not me. Like, and a lot of people, like, you have limited time. You have limited time to invest in a story, and you want to find one that really means something to you. So that's why the recommendation from someone else means so much. Because if you know someone you respect, liked, and was moved by the book, there's a good chance you will too. And that's why word of mouth is still the Cadillac, man. It's still the Rolls Royce. Yeah.
Okay, so American
Yeah.
Rebirth is a trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
Is it over? Are we going to see any more books in that series, or are you planning on going off on something else?
So this is something I've been thinking about. There's a lot of different stuff I want to do. This is kind of behind the curtain stuff, but I might be collaborating with a very well-known author on a fantasy novel sometime soon. I can't tell you who she is, but
Firsthand.
oh shit,
It
is a
okay. That narrows it down.
So it is a woman. So I talked to her. She's a friend of mine. She's a very, very successful author. So much so that I kind of just, like, when I hang around with her, I'm just like, can I please learn something from you? Like, she's incredible. She has something like 150 books on the New York Times bestseller list or something insane.
Oh, wow.
Like, yeah. And so I've known her for a long time. She's a really cool person, and we were chatting, and she was like, hey, let's you want to co-write a book together? And I was like, yes. So it will probably be a while down the pike, because she's super busy, obviously, and she's got a ton of stuff with her life going on. But it's possible that sometime in the next year or two or whatever, I might be writing a fantasy series with her, which would be amazing for me and my career, obviously. And just because she's a brilliant writer, and I want to learn from her, But outside of that, the answer to your question is yes. We will see more of the American Rebirth series. I am currently writing the prequel to the American Rebirth series. It's currently titled Times What They Are, but we'll see. That's kind of a working title. We'll see what it ends up being. But it's basically the story, for those that know my books, it's the days before the apocalypse, and it's Rob and Taylor. It's Rob and Taylor together in D.C., just kind of being regular. Rob's trying to find a job and trying to figure out what he's doing with his life, and Taylor is just kind of like in love with a guy down the street who doesn't know she exists, and they're just kids in D.C. And then like, the book starts right before, and then one day the apocalypse happens, and they don't know what the cause is. They just know that the city goes to shit. And so Rob and Taylor then have to kind of fight. Like they don't fight immediately. They don't know what's going on. They don't know how to fight. So they kind of like fumble through, kind of just hiding in their house, trying to figure out what's going on. Eventually, there's the guy that she knows from down the street is a soldier. He's a young guy, but he just had to do a tour of duty, and basically takes them under their wing, and like is like, if you want to survive, you need to follow me and do what I say. And it's basically the story of them, how they escape DC, how they get into the country, how they learn how to fight and learn how to. Rob, realizes he's an incredible shot with a gun, and is first comes to confront the reality of death and life and what the new world is. And so it's very raw. It's very, very emotional and powerful. Like, I'm having so much fun writing it, Evan, because it is like, if you liked Hood, it's like Hood on heroin, because it's like, because it's the moment where it's happening, and they're all just like struggling to deal with it. and this one guy is trying to help them through, and it's basically the story of how they get to Clearwater, how they meet whiskey, and then eventually how the Clearwater begins, how that whole town and that their Clearwater crew, their survival, their kind of Robin Hood in the woods begins. So it's that's the book I'm writing right now. Hopefully it'll be done. Oh God, I don't know. I'm still really early on. Hopefully it'll be done this by next summer. I don't know. We'll see. I'm gonna write my ass off. I'm gonna see how much I can do, but I'm loving it. I'm really excited. This is the most fun. I mean, I loved writing book three. Book three, American Rebirth, was it was like a life experience for me. I loved writing it, but it was really hard because I had so much to tie into book two and book one, and writing sequels in general is just really hard. You have so much to tie together. But this book has just been pure fun. It's just adrenaline and raw human feeling, and kind of like just regular kids trying to survive the apocalypse. And it's been so much fun to write, man. I can't wait to get it done and into the hands of readers. Like I'm so excited about it. And I released on my blog, like little snippets of it, because honestly, I wasn't sure if I was going to write it, because I wanted to write it, but I didn't know how much people would be interested in that, because it's kind of a prequel, or it's definitely a prequel. I'm going to brand it a little differently, but it's a prequel. So I sent it to my mailing list and some of my readers and see what they thought, and I got overwhelmingly positive feedback, which was great. So I'm really excited about it, and hopefully for me, the cool thing is, since it's kind of a seed, like it's sort of it's basically a standalone. Like, you read it and not know anything about the books, and it's a full story, but it also feeds directly into my series. So hopefully, if it kind of blows up, which, obviously that's the dream, right. If it blows up, it could feed directly into the series, and it could be really positive. And I think for post-apoc readers of any type, this is a book you're going to want to read, because it's just because it's about, it's shit hits the fan. It's, right. It's really the moment of oh shit, what do we do now? And like, right. And I really want to delve into that. I really want to delve into, like, they really don't know what to do. Like, do you leave home? Do you not leave home? Like, where do you go? Like, do you wait for family to show up? Like, they really don't. They really have no clue. And really, without this military kid their age who helps them through, like, they would have been fucked. Sorry, pardon my language, but oh
no, dude, this podcast has an E, so.
Okay, cool. Yeah, okay, good. Yeah. So they would be fucked if it went out for this guy. So because really what I was struggling with the story is that, like, they're not soldiers. Like, Taylor's just Taylor and Rob, they're just kids from DC. And, like, how would they actually survive before they met Whiskey and Whiskey takes them under their wing? Like, how did they get from DC to there and survive? And the obvious answer was, like, someone who knew a little bit how to survive at least would have to help them, because, regular good people without any idea what to do in the apocalypse usually don't do well. Right. So to me, it was like, how did they get there? And it's like a coming of age. It's like an apocalyptic coming of age story, because it's them coming to grips with how to survive, and how to transition from being millennials basically in civilization to being survivors. And it's been so much fun. Like, I know I keep saying that, but I'm enjoying the heck out of writing it, and I really can't wait to get it done. It's gonna, I'm gonna take it time and let it do it the right way and make sure it's what I want it to be. But I'm really excited about that. I can't wait to get out there. I already know what the cover's gonna look like and everything, so I'm pretty excited.
Dude, that sounds awesome. I absolutely love prequels, and I especially love prequels that come after I've already read, mm-hmm. what's happened before. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess after.
Yeah.
Because I'm fascinated with knowing the genesis of something. You're thrust into this world, this PA world, mm-hmm. and especially, like with a book like yours, or with, even something with The Road, where, the world is absolute shit. And you don't know why, and you just know that the world sucks, but you don't know exactly what happened. And then there's nothing I love more than when a writer goes back and gives us the whys and wherefores of what happened and all that. So yeah, I'm totally stoked
That's awesome.
to read this. And wow, next summer, huh? Man, that's a long time. Shit. Okay, well, whatever. I guess I'll have to wait. You know.
Well, I'm about a quarter of the way through the book now, but maybe a little bit less. I've been writing my tail off, but it's been I've been doing a lot this summer, and it's been it also is a labor of love for me, so I want to make sure I get it right. So hope maybe I'll get it before next summer, but that's my conservative estimate right now is by next summer. So we'll see. It depends how long it is too, but who knows? Maybe I'll be able to pump it out earlier.
All right, I'm going to ask you one last question.
Yeah.
If the world went to crap,
Mm-hmm.
and it was, we're living in a post-apocalyptic time, would you be the lone wanderer, kind of like a Mad Max, or would you be living in a more communal, I don't want to say commune, that's,
Yeah.
but kind of like a Walking Dead, where you're in a community.
Mm-hmm.
Which one would you be, and why?
I think there's something very powerful and like kind of dude romantic about the lone wanderer. And like I want to say like, yeah, I'd be that guy. I'd be that lone wanderer, like just doing, kind of surviving out there like a badass. But I know myself, and I would definitely be the community person. Because, like, I mean, I'm kind of a giver at heart, like seeing other people succeed and thrive and being a part of their success and helping other people just in general is something that means a lot to me. And so I actually think, as much as I am terrified and don't want the apocalypse at all, I know I would probably really enjoy the building and the nurturing side of really like bringing a community together and like being the glue that helps bring a community together. Like to me, that would mean a lot. One, because it's so like, that's just, you see the direct effect. Like you are literally helping build lives. You're helping build a new civilization, even if it's tiny one. But that idea of like building something and being a part of it and helping others is just something that's always been meaningful to me. It's kind of just the way I'm wired. Like I just like that. So, and also like it's in my nature to be a tight knit community person. Like people who know me know I don't make a ton of, like, I don't make friends easily. Like I don't just collect new friends, like I'm very, very selective about the people I am close to. But those people I am close to, I am like crazy loyal, and to me, being there for them and helping them is really important to me. And so like that's 100%. I'd be in a tight knit community of people that I wanted to help, that I felt were good people who deserved it. And it would be interesting. The interesting thing would be if you go in a community and like most of them people you care about, and one or two of them are like really people who shouldn't be there or are really bad people, and that's when it gets interesting. But then would I be the law, or would I be the diplomat, or would I be the voice of reason? Like that's to me the question that would happen. But I would definitely be a community based, like a driving force to bring people together. Just in my nature. The only way I could possibly be the wanderer is if like I lost everyone, and I would just be wandering to help people in random places, where I'd like go to a town and help people and wander in the next town. Like I'd be a wandering helper. It's weird. It's just I don't know. But yeah, that's I think that's a cool question, and because I think there are people who legitimately would be the lone wolf. But I think me personally, I'd be a glue guy.
Well, cool. Hey, you mentioned you had a blog.
I do.
Let us know where that is, and tell us where else we can find you.
So my blog is evanpickeringauthor.com. So it's EvanPickering author.com. You can email me at evanpickering@evanpickeringauthor.com. And then I have my Twitter, which is probably the social media I like the most these days. And you get at Evan P. Author. So again, EVANP Author. I also, like, my books are on Audible. They're on Amazon. They're on iTunes. They're on Google Play. They're on, they're basically everywhere you can find a book, an ebook, if you want to. They're also on paperback through CreateSpace. You can go on Amazon and get them there. Yeah, so they're pretty. Amazon's definitely the big cheese, but I'm on every, Barnes and Noble, Nook. I'm on that. I'm on basically everything that sells books. So yeah, but my blog, I love my blog. I post there every once in a while, and I also have a mailing list for those who are interested. If you go to my Twitter, you can jump on my mailing list, or if you go to my blog, you can find my mailing list under the contact section. So yeah, its mailing list is basically just updates of the blog, and I tell people, if you're on my mailing list, I might give you like an advanced copy of the book or something, or advanced copies of, fresh releases of snippets of something I'm working on, things like that. Just sort of things to bring people aboard and reward them for being readers and for supporting me and stuff. So I got a lot of cool people that support my books and are interested and stuff, and I'm always looking for more, obviously. So if anyone's interested, you're welcome to hop on, and if you ever want to ask me questions, you're welcome to DM me on Twitter. And I also have a Facebook, Evan Pickering Author on Facebook. I don't go on it a ton, but it's there. But yeah, DM me on Twitter or send me an email, and I'll be happy to chat with anyone if they're interested.
Well, Evan, this has been awesome.
Evan, it's been a long time coming, like I said, and I really enjoyed this. This was cool, man. You got a cool thing going here with the From the Wastes and The Last Librarian, and all this stuff is cool. I like your post-apocalyptic enthusiasm. It really shines through.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks, man. And I totally dig in your books, and I'm totally stoked for this prequel that's going to be coming out sooner than next summer.
I'm working on it.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much.
Yeah, dude, it's my pleasure. It's been a ball.
All right, well, take care.
All right, dude. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, Wanderers, thanks for listening. You can find my blog at fromthewastes11811.wordpress.com. My email is fromthewastes@gmail.com. And you can also find me on Twitter at fromthewastes and on Facebook at Facebook/fromthewastes. You can also find this podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Player FM, pretty much all your podcast players. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment and leave a review. Until next time, take cover and take care.